Welcome to the Bonsai Stuff Podcast, you legends. Thanks for listening. Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and this is the last episode for autumn. We're rolling into winter. Seems like autumn has gone past in the blink of an eye, which is good and bad. It's always a sad time to say goodbye to the beautiful leaves and colour on the trees, but for me, it's a really nice time because as everyone knows, I get to do a lot of work on pines and conifers around this time of the year and get to make them look magnificent. But with the change in season and the slowdown, the colder, wetter, darker days, the change in gloominess around the place. Gee, that's dramatic. But the change in things and just that continual wetness around the place means for me that I've got to be quite mindful in my yard about the cleanup and what I have to do around now. So I'll run through in this podcast. I want to make it a bit more of a practical one and talk about some things that I'm doing around the yard this time of the year for late autumn that I strongly encourage you to be doing as well. I know there's different climates around the country, obviously. But everything should be needing a bit of a tidy up around the place, especially in the southern part of Australia for this time of the year. And also it's pine time, which is not surprising. It's generally I've got a nice window for working on my pines, and I've been getting a lot of questions about it lately. Bit of pressure for timing to get things done, which there is and there isn't. So I want to just talk a little bit about why it's pine time right now and how it all works, and also to explain why we've got a little bit of time up our sleeves. So that's this episode, season 8, episode 19 of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. All right, let's get into it. So autumn is almost gone. By the time you're listening to this, it may be over. It might have a couple of days left, depending on what's happening with your part of the world. But for me, I've really noticed lately that it's getting, in Melbourne, it's definitely a lot wetter, darker, damper. Paths are starting to get slippery. There's things changing around the yard. It's the ground underfoot is a lot soggier. We've maybe not had a lot of rain. We definitely haven't had any warmth, not extreme warmth anyway. Nothing to really dry things out. So what that relates to for my bonsai is that things are just starting to feel like they're always damp, always wet, always a bit cold, which is fine. The trees can handle it, but I'm very mindful around this time of the year that there's stuff that I have to do and have to keep an eye on to make sure that I don't get damage to my trees, that I don't inadvertently just let things be without taking steps to make sure that the root system of the tree remains healthy. There's a real downside to being in these cooler months, and that's that the root system itself can start to rot if it just stays continually wet and the trees aren't taking up the moisture. Like there's no activity in the root system, so things can really start to slow down. And one of the signs that I look for, and that's what I suppose I'm trying to help with, is look around your trees. You might sort of go, I don't know what he's talking about. My trees are fine, but just keep an eye on the pots themselves, and especially if you've got them in a sheltered area or they're shaded, there might be a tree above them, or maybe the position they're in the yard now with the sun sort of dropping on the horizon, maybe doesn't quite get as much sun as it used to, or during the warmer months. Maybe it was in a full sun position, but now you might find that it's in a pretty shaded little area. So what can happen is that lovely stuff, the green stuff, starts to grow on the pot that I have this love-hate relationship with. The moss starts to build up. So I'm definitely looking at moss on the pots as an indicator that things are starting to stay wet. It looks lovely. I agree. It looks really nice, and I'm not going to get into an argument with anybody that wants to keep moss on their trees. I'm not going to start that or open that can of worms. But for me, I look to remove it as much as I possibly can around this time of the year and stay on top of it. You don't want that moss getting anywhere near your trunk. If you get an aggressive growing moss that sort of starts to shoot up the trunk, I agree. It can look really nice. It can add character. It can, make you feel like you're in the middle of a forest somewhere. I've heard all the arguments. I've said them myself, but I've also seen the downside. Once that moss starts to get into the trunks themselves, especially on something with some bark on it, it's almost impossible to get rid of. The old story of old tale you would have been told, get some white vinegar and mix it 50% with water and dab it on there. That'll sort it out. It makes it go brown. I'll give you that. But does it actually kill the moss? It doesn't. And next time you have a nice downpour, in a couple of weeks' time, you'll go out there and you have a look at the tree and that green moss will be back and grown further from where it was last time. So the best solution for me, tweezers, pick it off, get rid of it, but just try and prevent it in the first place if you can. Like it's very hard. Don't be hard on yourself if you can't, because like I said, as the daylight hours start to drop and it gets wetter, then this moss starts to grow absolutely everywhere. It's a great time to collect it and over the winter and put it aside for when you want to put it on your tree for display purposes. But as far as protection of the trunks, you've got to be absolutely vigilant on it at this time of the year. And if you are going to keep it on the pots, if you do think it looks nice, fantastic, great. But just push it back from the nabari, push it back from the roots, push it back from the trunk. Give yourself some kind of a barrier to protect. It's like having buffalo grass or couch or any of those sort of runner grasses. When you plant the seeds, it looks great for starters, but then the rotten stuff starts burrowing into your garden beds around it, and it's almost impossible to stop. Once it gets in there, it's very, very hard to stop. I've been told, dig a barrier down this far, put a sleeper in the ground, and that'll stop it. And it does for a couple of years, but then sooner or later that the cooch gets underneath and takes off and goes crazy. Moss is exactly the same as that. It has exactly the same impact, and once it starts, it's very hard to stop. And you might find over the warmer months, it looks like it's disappeared, looks like you're on top of it. We get to this colder part of the year again, you look at the trunk and go, yep, there it is again. So just be on top of maintaining that. The other part that comes around this time of the year, which is more concerning for me, is that sludge that really starts to build up on the pots. And I've noticed it on a couple of my trees at the moment where they may have gone into dormancy a little bit earlier than other trees around the place. It's stayed wet. They're not in a nice enough area. Maybe I've found that, after they've been in the pots for quite a while as well, and the water maybe doesn't drain quite as much, the air water transfer really doesn't happen quite as much, I can get a bit of an issue with that sludge build up. And once that sludge comes on there, the only option you've got is to get like a spatula or something like that, or the edge of your root rake or something like that, and just scrape it off. Take it off that top layer. But it doesn't necessarily fix the problem. The sludge is showing you that there's a problem. So, yep, sure, get rid of that. But you've got to do something with that root system to ensure that you're fixing the problem that the sludge is telling you that's there. So sludge is saying, hey, water's not draining, it's pooling in this pot, and it's really wet, and, yep, sure, there's some rot that's going to happen on this tree. I'm giving you advance notice now to say that something's going to go wrong with this tree if you don't do anything about it. So sure, scratch off the sludge, but then look to maybe scrape off the very top layer of soil as well, just lightly with your rake. Even if you put your rake on the side and use it like as a sort of a sickle sort of type effect, just scratch off that top layer of the soil. And then get, a chopstick or a screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, something like that. Just gently put it into the soil and just aerate it a little bit as well. Just, give it half a dozen spots around the pot. Varies obviously based on the size of the pot, but just aerate it a little bit, just to allow that water to get out as well and the air to get into the root system. It can help. It's such a simple thing to do, but it helps significantly with this problem with the sludge. Also, just double check, flip the pot over, have a look at the drainage holes at the bottom. Just make sure that they're not blocked at all, that there's not debris underneath the pots. I'll get onto debris in a minute, but make sure there's nothing sort of sitting around those drainage holes on the pot. If you find that there's some, anything root system growing out of there or whatever it is, maybe just give it a bit of a clean up, just so there's a gap between the bench or whatever the pot's sitting on and those holes too, so that air can sort of circulate under there to help that water to evaporate, to move on, to drip and drain from the bottom of the pot. If you find that it's plugged up for any kind of reason, then just do a bit more work on those drainage holes. And it's really the sludge that I find that tells me that there's these kind of problems. Trees that don't have the sludge, I don't necessarily flip over every tree that I've got and look at them and go, oh yeah, okay, I'll fix that up. If there's no problem, then don't make work for yourself. But if you see that there's that sludge, then just take action on it now, because we're just before winter. I'd hate to see what this root system looks like at the end of winter. Another 3 months sitting around like this, really doing not too much at all, with the rot and deterioration that would occur inside the pot is no good. So that's staying excessively wet at this time of the year is something that you've really got to keep an eye on. And I talk a lot about positioning of your trees in the yard for the best sunspot, the best open area, and it becomes really evident now when you've got restrictions on where you can keep your trees. Which, hey, I get it. Not everyone can live on 100-acre farms and have the joy of driving trees around and putting them wherever they grow best. But you have to try and adapt as much as you possibly can. And it could be that as we get further and further in towards dormancy, I really don't like trees sitting under verandas and eaves and all that sort of stuff. But if it stays excessively wet and they can get into a drier spot, beside the house, in a sheltered area, then that's best for the tree. Then that's the best thing that you can possibly do. But anyway, the other thing is the automated watering systems are a no-go. Definitely not at this time of the year. By that I mean, if you've got a schedule where you run them automatically every X number of days, every second day you're running for 2 minutes, whatever it is, or every 3 days for 5 minutes, or every 1 day for 1 minute, turn it off. Seriously, turn it off completely. You've got to have it where you can still water your trees if needed with an automated watering system, but do it based on you saying, yes, the trees need to be watered at this time, as opposed to letting the system run automatically. There's no point if the trees aren't taking the water up, if the pots are damp already, if you've got drizzle and dew coming in overnight. What's the point? What's the point in running an automated system to just simply add to that issue where watering will start to cause you some excessive watering will start to cause you some serious problems. You may not have time to be hand watering everything. I'd strongly suggest that hand watering around now is a great thing to do. If you're away and you're sort of away from your trees, I still wouldn't use a daily or a regular automated watering system. I'd be checking the camera and tapping in manually and saying, okay, I've had a look around. Yeah, look, it hasn't rained at home for 3 days. Okay, I'll run it once, but I'm just going to do it as a gentle water. I wouldn't just. It's a time of year where watering, instead of being beneficial, starts to become detrimental to the trees. So just it's time to hit the off button on the automated systems and don't let them run as you would in spring or summer. Now's the time to really be mindful that your trees could possibly go 4, 5, 6 days without water in the cooler, wetter climates. Whereas, I know that this podcast listened to all over the place. You might be still having beautiful weather like mates over in Western Australia at the moment, where it's beautiful and sunny, or Brisbane, cracking temperatures up there. I love winter up in Brisbane. But it's one of those things that you need to make an assessment of, because the trees, the trees that are in dormancy just won't be taking it up. So it's not weather based anymore. It's about the daylight hours the trees are getting, and whether the tree's flicking the switch to say, all right, it's time for a bit of a slowdown, a bit of a break, whether it stops completely or whether it still continues, in some form and just slows down a little bit. Like, for instance, junipers, your junipers, you just need to keep an eye on them. You can't put them in the bracket saying, okay, they've gone to sleep, because they don't. Australian natives, do they necessarily go to sleep? They don't. They continue to grow, but their water uptake during these shorter daylight periods is definitely a lot less. So you don't just keep ploughing water on there like you would normally. You've got to really, really, I suppose, individually decide for each bonsai that you have in your collection, does it need water today? It sounds like such a simple, stupid thing, but this watering part, it's, I don't know how many times over the last 8 seasons I've talked about watering, but it's something that, you've got to be on top of, that you perpetually, you'll always get it wrong at some point or another. I do. Everyone does in the entire bonsai world. Sooner or later, there's overwatering or underwatering issues that are going to happen. But I'm just trying to give you the heads up now to say we're heading into a period where it's really going to be consequential, negative consequences to excessively watering. So just stay on top of it and look for these little signs like the sludge on the pots and the moss. Moss is like an intro to say, hey, yes, it's starting to get to that period. Sludge is like, okay, I'm telling you there's something going wrong with it and you need to fix it. So there's some simple stuff to do. Trees that are getting sludge on them too, flag them for repotting, because you might need to have a look at what's going on inside the root system anyway. It may be that it's too dense, or the soil mix that's being used might be holding too much moisture. Whatever it is, it just might need to be flagged to say, okay, it's time to do something. Around this time of the year, we're right at the end of autumn. The last leaves should be starting to fall off the trees, the deciduous at the moment. So it's a time where bloody good cleanup around the yard is warranted as well. Try and get it before those leaves start to break down and turn into soil, start to bring in all the bugs and that sort of stuff as well. The more you stay on top of it, and it seems like a job you're doing every day or every 2 days, cleaning leaves off benches and removing them from foliage, but the more you do, the less work you have to do. If you leave it for one big cleanup, then it's a monstrous job. Well, I find it anyway, that if it's like weeding. If you just do it all the time, if every time you walk past the trees you're plucking leaves off or you're cleaning off the benches and dusting stuff down, then yeah, sure, next time you go back out there, that it'll be the case. But sooner or later it's going to run out. So a 2-second clean as opposed to a 2-hour clean for me is far better. So I'd rather make it part of my routine every day when I walk around the trees. Every couple of hours, walk around, start removing stuff from the trees, and then when it's back there, when I do the next walk around, just accept that's the way the world is in nature, and it's something that I can't control. So just do the cleanup. It's too late with those leaves having fallen from your deciduous. I would strongly suggest to be mindful from now on over this winter period. Only prune deciduous as is essential. If you can wait till later, another couple of months as they start to wake up, post early repotting. If you get into that early prior to leaf burst, but you see things starting to happen, that's a great time to prune the deciduous again. Doing it now means that you might have those open wounds during the dormancy period, which is it's a real no-no for me. I want to try and I'd rather leave the trees now and say, okay, I'll get to you before you start, spending resources, allocating resources to bud growth. I'll sort it out then, because there's definitely a few that I haven't got to in my yard, and they're just going to have to stay the way they are until I get to the point where I go, you know what, you are starting to wake up. And it can start to, I can start to make the cuts as we need. But anyway, that debris removal is paramount at this time of the year. And like I said, once winter gets here, there'll be less and less of it. So you're at the real tail end now of the cleanup, the last lot of leaves, and then smooth sailing for a few months. You should be okay. The last job that I want to talk about is removing the fertilizer. For me, I use the tea bags, which you should know, and they help retain moisture on the pots. Forget what what's in the tea bag and what it's doing to the tree. Ignore that. I look at it simply at this point of time and say that tea bag now is causing my pots to stay too wet. So I've got to get rid of them. So whereas, when I get through the end of spring and I'm coming into summer, I'll say, perfect, I'll leave the tea bags on there because they're going to help retain a little bit extra moisture. Now I look at it and go, you're going to retain moisture, which means it could lead to overwatering, it could lead to root rot. It's time for them to go. So over the next couple of weeks, I definitely suggest that it's time to get rid of the fertilizer. And if you don't use the tea bags, if you're just putting fertilizer on top of the soil, again, I would look at removing it in any shape or fashion that you can. Scratch it off, do whatever you have to do to make sure that the soil is allowed to breathe as much as possible, as much as we can. Let that moisture out as well as letting the moisture in, and we should be fine and set up for what's around the corner after the next couple of months. We start getting into repotting. We really don't want any damage to the root system between now and the time that you get to repot. But if you're not going to be repotting, it's a long wait until spring to see if there's been issues. So just keep an eye on around the yard at this period late in autumn. Righto. It is pine time. I've said that before. You've heard it around this time of the year that as we get to the close of the growing period for pines, it's time to start doing some work on them and cleaning them up. And I'm not going to go into the work that's needed, but it's just it's a time to make them look great, and it's an essential bit of work. So I'll just talk about black pines for starters, but then I'll drift into other different varieties. So with the black pines, there's the decandling period, which is really a specific point in time. Like it's very much down to a point in time in the calendar that you have to get it done. Like you have to make time for it. It's within a couple of day window. All right, this tree has to be decandled. So it's very, very specific. This work that gets done now with the pines, the window is a lot bigger. Okay, so it's pine time, and it makes sweat start to form on my brow every time I say it, because I look around the yard thinking, I've got so many trees I've got to get through, and there's a lot to do, and it's like okay, so then I've got repotting to think of. I've got these other jobs that are starting to appear in the future as well, and for me, I feel that my biggest enemy always, and my biggest fear that I have, is time. And not having enough time to get things done, and becoming overwhelmed almost to the point that you sit there, stewing, thinking, I'm just not going to get this done, rather than actually just saying, shut up and just do it. I find myself getting a bit overwhelmed with it. But then I have a nice, good, hard talk to myself and say, you know what, you've got time, and it's important I wanted to talk about it in the podcast just to alleviate some pressure, I suppose. Pull the pressure valve on the cooker and just say it's okay. Yes, it is pine time, but you've got a window, and it's a lot bigger window than what you may be thinking you've currently got. But I want to explain how the window works. So we look for a point in time when the pines stop growing. All right, and this is all of them. Or your whites, Scots pines, Mugos, whatever it is. It gets to a point where during the season, this is for me in my yard, because there's going to be people listening to this where these pines, and I've seen them up north in Cairns and up in Brisbane, where this window of work maybe doesn't quite necessarily apply as much, because the things grow almost 24/7. They just continue to grow and grow and grow. So this is more for the people in the southern area Australia, where we get this growth dormancy sort of cycle with our trees, with our pines. And when you're working with them, the window of starting the work really happens at the end of the growing time, whatever that is. For me, I find that generally by about the end of autumn, the last month, the end of April, the last month of autumn and the first part of winter, for me, is a really nice, comfortable, safe window to say, all right, the pines aren't doing anything. Like everything stopped. Like the buds that I've asked to grow after decandling, the new shoots, they've grown. The needles have lengthened, they've extended, and they've stopped getting any longer. When I've candle cut my Scots pines, yep, they've reset buds to grow in spring. They're set. They're done. They're not developing any further. Perfect. Okay, I've got those in place. Radiators, all right. So I've done the candle cutting. They've pushed the new shoots. They've started to grow. They've set. They're done. I don't have to worry that anything more is going to happen now until things, daylight hours start to get longer and warmth starts to come back in, and the trees go, hey, yep, we're back. It's growing period again. So I've got this window, and this is what everybody that listens to the podcast that has pines, this is the window that you need to determine for your yard, for your trees. So you should be into definitely will be into the period where you can say, okay, I can safely say that, yep, the number of hours, daylight hours have dropped, so therefore the pines will be stopped. They'll be slowed down. They'll be, you might have warmer weather, but it's still definitely at that point where the daylight hours aren't there enough for the trees to continue to push and grow. So they'll be realizing that, hey, it's getting towards that point where I need to stop and have a rest. So they'll have slowed down, stopped, mine are all stopped, mine are all done. And they have been for a few weeks now, about 3 or 4 weeks. So you work at that start period, but then the second one, the end of that period that we've got to work on the trees is really when they start to wake up, which is just after they should be repotted. So if you, in your mind, say, okay, I repot my pines on this date, whatever it is, then, okay, so just past that, they'll start to wake up. So really the work for your pines has to be done and finished prior to that repotting period. For me, repotting for my pines starts in August. In Canberra, talking to people up there, their repotting for their pines starts in September. Great, whatever it is. So therefore, if the start of the slowdown, the dormancy period is around about, let's say, May, then I've got May, June, and July to get my pines done and dusted. If I err on the side of caution, then really, some could wake up in that July period as well. So for me, that's why I set myself the window of May and June being the 2 months that I have up my sleeve to get all my pines done. Still makes me feel like I'm under pressure because 2 months, it's not a lot of time to get through a hell of a lot of trees, but that's my window. Whereas, speaking of mate up in Canberra recently, we were sort of saying, okay, well, you've really got then, May, June, July, and, you could creep into August as well to get your pines done because you're looking at repotting in September. So your trees, err on the side of caution, have your pines finished before the end of July. That should be a nice, comfortable 3-month window to work through your trees and get it done. So it's, like I said, it's more an understanding of why we're doing it at this time of the year and why we've got this period of time to do it and why it's got to be done before that growing period starts. Because once the tree starts allocating resources, you don't want it to be wasting them on buds or branches or areas or creating back budding on branches that are going to be removed, like anything that's going to be taken off the design of the tree, should be done before the tree starts going, okay, yep, all right, I'm waking up. Here comes spring. All right, here it comes, fellas. Here comes the good stuff. Start growing again, and you don't want it sort of going, okay, well, I'm going to waste 20% on areas that are going to be cut off soon anyway. You may as well say, okay, those 20% areas are gone. All right, so then the resources go exactly where you want it to go in a balanced fashion. So it's very important that the work gets done. But when I was writing the notes for the podcast, it was like, okay, it's pine time. We've got time. But then I just wrote why and circled it. And it's the why that I wanted to get through on the podcast, to say from dormancy to growing. When you get to the growing section, come back as a safety margin a little bit on the time scale. And that's your window that you've got to safely, comfortably get your pines done. You can needle pluck it almost any time of the year. When it gets to decandling, you can do further work on the trees there. But the really important part, if you're under the pump now and you don't have time to, you should have time if you got bonsai. But if you, for whatever reason, if you don't have time to get into your pines and get this work done now, then I'd strongly suggest the one thing that I would be doing is getting my scissors out and cutting back. The guideline 1 to 2, perfect, fantastic. It's a great scenario. It's the way to develop nice ramification on your pines. But if something, as I've been banging on about, if something's too long, if it's too long now, it's going to get even longer when it starts to grow. So look at start removing those longer shoots. I was working on one of my pines the other day, and I looked at it and I had that thought running through my head. If it's too long, don't just let it be. You've got to make sure that you cut this back. And so I looked at the tree and I went, it's beautiful. Look at this beautiful developed part of the branch. I sat back, looked at the tree and went, the silhouette's just too big. It's really starting to push way too far out from where it should be. So I went, you can't just talk the talk, you got to walk the talk, so if it's too long, you've got to cut it off. So I looked at it and went, yeah, right, well, it would look best if I cut it off back to here. So I went, all right, done, cut it off. Then I held up the branch and I realized I'd just cut off 4 years of ramification development on the tree. And the ramification was really, really nice. Like, it was nice division, everything had spaced out nicely. It was nice volume, the buds all looked great. But the tree was, so much better with that 4-year-old branch being removed, that I can't look at it and think I've just wasted 4 years. It's like, well, for the past 3 years, that branch has served a purpose and held the form of the tree, and I must have been happy with it at the time. But now it's time for it to go. So I'm not, I'm not sad. It's a hard decision to make, but keeping that in mind when you are doing this work is going to be a really nice, it'll keep you on the path. It'll keep you positive. It'll keep you making the right decisions with these things that you. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. I didn't want to get onto the work on the pines. I just want to explain about the window that you've got, that it's okay. You've got time still, and don't put yourself under immense pressure. The understanding of why you got that window from the dormancy until the growing period, come back, give yourself a bit of a margin for in case your tree wakes up early for whatever reason. Give yourself some buffer between finishing the work and repotting the tree as well. If you are going to repot a pine, then maybe do the work on it before the pines that aren't going to be repotted, so the tree's got a little bit longer to recover and whatever else. But that's the frame and the mindset that I have, and the reasoning behind why it's time to do your pines, but you've got a buffer. I hope it helps. Well, that's it, folks. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Also, I hope you've had a great autumn around your yard. Hopefully you've had some memorable colour, something to put a smile on your dial to make you appreciate those beautiful deciduous bonsai that we have in our collections. If you don't have any deciduous, then you're missing out. I was asked the other day about something about where do I see bonsai heading in the future, and it's probably not a bad topic for talking about on podcasts, but it's whatever puts a smile on your face. Let me tell you, it's not complex. If you enjoy looking at whatever windswept trees in your yard, then fantastic. That's the future, as far as I'm concerned. Doesn't mean that I have to look at it, but and I'll never shove my opinions down anyone's throat and force them to go down a certain path with their trees. But it's whatever makes you happy, really. It's that's all it's about. For me, all I want to do is spread an immense love of bonsai around the world, because it's so good for us. Being around these trees, I've said it so many times, and I feel it in my bones through and through. Being near these trees is special. It's a privilege to get to work with them and nurture them and be a custodian of them and bring them to a level that they may not have achieved by themselves. Your styling is individual. The care for them is universal. The way that we look after our trees is something that we can all do together. But what they look like is completely up to you. And the trees that you choose to have in your backyard, that's up to you. It's like so many things in this world; it's no one else's business at all. And as long as you're happy doing it, then nothing's gonna stop you. Certainly not me. So anyway, thanks for listening in. Please take some of that advice and look around your pots for future potential damage, because you can get on top of it quite easily now. In 3 months' time, it might not be quite the story that you've got. Also, if your pots are staying too wet, remember that little trick of putting something under one edge of the pot to allow the water to run down and change the water table in the pot. It can be a stone or a bit of wood or something like that. Anything really, just to get the angle on the pot. So it's don't have it so it's on a 45 degree, but get it so it's sort of just up one side compared to the other. And you'll find that the water will definitely help drain out. Anyway, hope that's been helpful. I'll be back in a week's time. As always, I do appreciate all the support that I get for this podcast, and you subscribers. You mean the world to me and to this podcast. So thank you as always. It's lovely knowing that so many people are enjoying the podcast, and I hope you're getting as much out of it as I'm putting into it. So thanks for listening, and as always, until next time, happy bonsai.